Your monthly subscription box from Postflybox.com includes all the materials needed to tie a dozen flies, along with some extra goodies. This is a somewhat modern take on a traditional soft hackle pheasant tail, a fly that's consistently fooled even the wariest of trout for better than 100 years. To begin, pick up one of the size 14 hooks and place its point into one of the pearl-colored beads. Slide the bead around and up to behind the hook eye. You can then get the assembly firmly secured in the jaws of your tying vise. Once done, push the bead down the hook shank a little. For thread, load a bobbin with a spool of brown uni-thread. Get the thread started on the hook shank behind the eye and take a half dozen or so wraps rearward before snipping off the excess tag. Slide the bead up to your tying thread so it's a bead width back from the rear edge of the hook eye. Make back and forth wraps over top of the bead to secure it, ending with your thread behind the bead. The longer of the two types of mallard drake flank feathers is used to form the tail of the fly. After stripping off the lower fuzzy fibers, pull down a dozen or so fibers perpendicular to the stem, and while keeping their tips aligned, strip them free. Hold the fibers in your right hand and measure to form a tail about a hook shank in length. Keeping that measurement, pass the fibers to your left hand. Reach in with your tying scissors and using the back edge of the bead as a guide, snip the fibers off square, then bring them down to on top of the hook shank. Give your bobbin a counterclockwise spin so the first thread wrap jumps rearward to catch the very butt ends of the fibers. Take thread wraps rearward, pulling up and toward you with the fibers. This will ensure they land on top of the hook shank as opposed to being pushed over to the far side. Wrap all the way to the start of the bend, then back forward to behind the bead. Tobacco brown SST dubbing is used to create the body of the fly. Pull a small clump free from the packet and use it to produce a 2 to 3 inch long noodle on your tying thread. Be careful not to overdub. Start taking wraps with the noodle so the dubbing begins at the back edge of the bead, then tapers down to bare thread at the base of the tail. With the bare thread, make open spiral wraps over top of the dubbing to rib and segment the fly. When you reach the back edge of the bead, go over top of it, then anchor your tying thread in front of it. If there are any extra long or wayward dubbing fibers, now's a good time to give them a trim and clean things up. Now, select one of the shorter fibered drake mallard flank feathers. Strip off the lower fuzzy fibers from the stem, then get hold of its very tip. Gently preen down the lower fibers to isolate that tip, then snip it off. You should end up with a feather that looks something like this. With the shiny or front side facing you, measure so the fibers extend to the base of the tail, then fold the feather around the hook shank and take wraps of tying thread to secure it. The idea is to completely encircle the front end of the fly with the fibers. It's fairly easy to move them around by hand if necessary. When you're satisfied with the positioning, take a few wraps of tying thread to lock the fibers in place, then snip the excess butt end of the feather off close. Take a few more thread wraps to cover up the butt ends and build a neat little head on the fly. Reach for your whip finish tool and use it to do a 4 or 5 turn back to front whip finish, seat the knot well, and snip your tying thread free. A drop of head cement, here Sally Hansen's hard as nails, applied to the wraps will dress up the fly and add to its durability. And that's an updated version of the classic soft hackle pheasant tail. Dead drifted, swung, or stripped, there's basically no wrong way to fish this fly.